So let's take a look at running a single mission and how to program that mission. You can see I've got my robot programmed here in program slot number 2 to go get one of the red frogs on my alliance side. So I do a long button push here and out it goes to get that frog and brings it back to base, and I score. So let's talk about something called pseudocode. Pseudocode is something that programmers use all the time to help them plan their programs. Pseudocode is written in a language that we can easily understand, and in our case, it's English. Okay, so we're going to write our pseudocode out in English, and just plain English so everybody can understand it. We don't have to worry about parameters and using the right commands and parentheses and things like that. We're just going to write out what we want our robot to do for a certain task that it needs to accomplish. In my case, I am going to go get an alliance frog, and I'm calling this a mission. Okay, so I've got my alliance frog mission pseudocode I'm going to write. And the first thing I want to do when I'm going to go get that frog is to set up my robot. Okay, in this case I want to set my speeds right, so it's going perfectly straight when I go forward, go perfectly straight when I go backwards. So we need to set up the robot, the first thing. And you're going to want this as your first step in all of your pseudocode, and you're going to want this in your first step of all the programs that you write for the competition. Okay, so number one, set up the robot. So what do we need to have it do next? Well, we need to make sure that my end effector, in my case I call the thing on the end of my robot a rake because it rakes up all the game pieces. I need to make sure that is out of the way and not on the floor and not going to get in the way. So I'm going to raise the rake. Next, I am going to drive forward for 19 inches. I measured that amount of space between where I start my robot in this mission and where the game piece, and in this case it's a red frog, is located. So I want to drive forward for 19 inches, and then I want to lower the rake to the floor. And I'm going to wait just a second right there and make sure everything settles into place, make sure that the frog is on my rake and so forth, and then I'm going to drive backwards for 19 inches, and hopefully that brings me back into starting base, and when I get back into starting base, I'm going to raise the rake. Okay, so that's a pseudocode for one of the Alliance Frog missions. Set up the robot, raise the rake, go forward 19 inches, lower the rake to the floor, wait a second, and then go backwards 19 inches and raise the rake. So now that I've got it all worked out, a step-by-step on how to do this mission, I can take that step-by-step and easily convert it into a robot program in JAL. So I'm going to put this in program 2 of my 8-slot programming template. I've got program 0. That's, in my case, it's already set up as my remote control, and program 1 is doing something else. So I'm going to put this particular thing in program 2. And the first thing we decided to do in our pseudocode was to set up the robot. So I'm going to put a comment here called set up the robot. Remember now, a comment is for humans to see. The robot, when you download that, this comment does not get downloaded to the robot. So it's just for us to see, just to see what we're doing. So set up robot. And to do a comment, you put a semicolon before whatever you're going to comment about. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do was set the speeds of my robot. So I'm going to do that by using the motor tune features, that little subroutine. And on my motor map, I found out that my robot goes straight when I give it a 170 on motor 1 and a 0 on motor 2. And as far as going backwards, a motor tune backwards, it works best for me when I give it a 50 on motor 1 and the full 255 on motor 2. Okay, so there. Step one, I've taken my pseudocode, set up the robot, and easily turned it into JAL commands. All I had to do was give it my motor tune forward, my motor tune backward. Next is to raise the rake. Okay, so I'm going to put a comment here, raise rake. To raise the rake, well, my rake is on motor 3, so I'm going to tell my motor 3 to go to a certain position. And from my motor map, I know that my rake is raised when motor 3 is at 127. Okay, so that's pretty simple. My next pseudocode was go forward 19 inches. Now the way I'm going to do that is to use my encoder forward. And we found out that if we take however many inches we need to go forward and divide that number by 0.126, we find out how many ticks it takes to go forward that many inches. So in my case, I took 19 inches, divide that by 0.126, and I come up with roughly 141. So I'm going to use the forward encoder command, and I'm going to put 151 ticks as the parameter. So that's go forward 19 inches. Next in my pseudocode, I said I wanted to lower the rake to floor. Okay, so I'm going to put another comment here. You don't have to put all these comments in. I'm doing it to illustrate our pseudocode converted into regular JAL code. So I need to lower my rake, and from my motor map, I know that if I lower motor number 3 to the number 3 in my case, the rake is going to be on the floor. Now yours is going to be different because your robot is going to be set up different. So you need to find those specific numbers for your robot. The next thing in my pseudocode was to wait 1 second. All right, so that's pretty simple. We're just going to choose the wait command here, and remember that the wait is in milliseconds, so I'm going to wait 1,000 milliseconds right there. And then, next in my pseudocode was to go backwards for 19 inches. Okay, so we already figured out that it's 151 ticks to go 19 inches, so now we just use our backward encoder command, and we want to go backward 151 ticks. Backward encoder 151. And the last thing in my pseudocode was to raise the rake again. And we know that in my case, motor 3 is the rake, and 127 is the raised rake. So it's that simple. We took our pseudocode, set up the robot, raise the rake, go forward 19 inches, lower the rake, wait 1 second, go backwards 19 inches, and then raise the rake. We took that and turned it into JAL code fairly simply. And now when we run this program, we should see this result. So let's go ahead and take one more look at this. Now remember to choose your program number. You use your binary counting. There I'm on program number 2. I've done my robot setup. Step 1, raise the rake, go forward 19 inches, just like my pseudocode. Lower the rake to the floor, wait 1 second, go backward 19 inches, and raise the rake. We're done.